Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to be diving in to my spiritual awakening, I guess you could call it, journey. So there's a lot of different points along the journey where I experienced what I would consider an awakening. So it's not really just one event, and it is an ongoing process. So, I expect to continue awakening and experiencing those moments of awakening and expansion as I continue to live. But there are some very pivotal points in my journey. So today we are going to go back to the beginning and walk through my life up until recent times and kind of talk about what changed for me, because I do experience reality in a completely different way than I used to. So, how did we get here? Well, let's talk about it. So, it's funny because I was trying to record a video for today. I tried more than 3 times and it kept just not working. So finally I gave in and said, okay, I think I know the video I'm supposed to make. So that's what we're making right now. So I'm going to kind of do this in a sort of chronological way, because I think that will help make it more understandable. So I'm going to go all the way back to my childhood. So I had a bit of an unorthodox upbringing. I was homeschooled, or rather unschooled, which means no school. You supposedly learn from the world by going places and going to museums and stuff in person, which we did, and I did learn a lot, but there were things that I did not learn or have access to. And I was raised really strict, independent, fundamental Baptist. And because we did not go to school, and our family kind of had this worldview of, there's us and then there's them. Us being the people of God, the church, the good people, and then all of the normal people who went to public school, wore pants, because the girls, we had to wear long dresses, listened to music with a rock beat, or, even worse, were not Christian. All of those people were kind of seen as bad, and we try not to associate with them. And so that's how I was raised. And what that meant was that we were very in this religious world. So it was all I knew. My parents were already going to this church by the time that I was born. So some of my first memories were in the church or relating to the church. My family would go 4 times a week, and they were very involved in the programs at the church. And when we were at home, we would read the Bible, and yeah, everything was religious. There was no life outside of religion. There was only religion. That was the only reality. And so this kind of spurred me into an existential crisis very early. So I know for a lot of people, they'll have little glimpses of existential crises throughout their life. But for a lot of people, it doesn't really hit them hard until they are realizing that they're getting older. Some people don't even really think about it until they're like 50. For me, my existential crisis / pondering of death was the very first thing that I did in this existence. So that's because the only reality that I lived in was a reality that told me that a couple of things are true. One, we're all sinners. That includes me, an innocent little child. I was told that I was a worthless wretch and that I needed to beg for God's forgiveness. That's why he did that whole thing where he sent Jesus to die for my sins, because I'm disgusting and just bad. And what I deserve is to burn in hell for an eternity with fire and brimstones and gnashing of teeth. And this is what I was told via church services, via the Bible. Every single week, my entire childhood, the formative years. And my parents didn't believe in dumbing things down for kids. So they would bring us into the adult church services, and we'd have to hear about all of the really vile and insane stuff that's in the Bible. I think a lot of people don't realize what's in there. So if you call yourself a Bible believer, maybe read it, because there's some really messed up stuff in there. A lot of murder. God's doing it all the time in a really illogical way. And so that's very scary for a kid. So, and also, I took things seriously. I am a very earnest person, and so I would sit down and I would listen to what they were telling me. It did not resonate with me. I did not feel like a sinner because, spoiler alert, I wasn't. I was an innocent child who, on some level, knew my inherent goodness and my purity. And so it was a really weird conundrum of this deep knowing, but it's going up against all of these adults around me that are looking down at me and saying, no, that's not how it is. You're not pure. You're not innocent. You're not good. You're bad. You're so bad that you deserve to burn for it forever. Unless you beg for forgiveness. humiliate yourself, beg for forgiveness to be saved. And so, that was reality for me. And so, for me, I really tried. I wanted, obviously, not to burn forever. So, the first time I remember praying to accept Jesus as my Savior, I was 3. And it was just out of a place of fear. It's like, gun to your head, accept Jesus as your Savior, or else you burn forever. Obviously, you're gonna accept Jesus as your Savior. So, I did. The problem with that is that that's arbitrary. Basically, there's no way to know if you believed enough to pass the threshold. Which is scary because this is a serious thing. If you mess it up, you're gonna burn forever. And because I had critical thinking skills, even as a little child, I was aware that there was always a bit of doubt, mostly because of all of the incongruencies that I was picking up on. And so I knew, I was honest with myself, and I knew that there was a part of me that didn't believe, and that terrified me because, I thought about dying every day. I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia my entire childhood, and I would just lay there staring at the bunk bed above me and thinking, wow, the same way that I'm aware right now and I'm seeing this wood above me, I'm gonna see my own death. I'm gonna be aware. I'm gonna watch myself die. And then what's gonna happen? That's something they would say at church all the time. They would say, if you were to die today, where would you go? And, as somebody who had accepted Jesus as my Savior hundreds, thousands of times, I still didn't know. Had I fully believed it one of those times, had it passed that arbitrary line between burning forever and going to heaven, there's no way to know. And nobody around me seemed to care. I tried to suffer in silence because there's a lot of shame that comes with that. And, you don't want to be a doubting Thomas. That's a guy in the Bible who doubted Jesus. And everyone made fun of him, I guess. So, I would try to not bother my parents, but sometimes the fear was too much, and I'd have to go and knock on their door in the middle of the night, crying, and they would always just tell me stuff that did not make sense. No offense, but they did not know what they were talking about. And as a kid, you have no experience to compare what your parents are telling you against. As an adult, I feel very validated because I'm like, yeah, that was really, really dumb what you guys were saying. But as a kid, all you have is this vague sort of knowing that something's not right. And then you have these people that are supposed to protect you and love you that are telling you this horrible, dark, really does not resonate with me at all, conspiracy theory, basically, about all of these entities and this God in the sky who he's allowed to do whatever he wants, but he's super strict about what you can do. And you're a lowly worm and he's perfect. It's a very creepy thing. And I think that it was hard for me to exist within that and look around and see nobody else. Like, is nobody else, like, does this not bother anyone else? Everyone else is just accepting it and believing it. So it was really painful for me. And this was every day, all day, because I didn't go to school. I did not have friends outside of church. So basically it was an existential crisis boot camp from ages 0 to, let's say, 12. And yeah, there was a lot of heaviness and darkness and pain and shame and fear. And I really was mad at my parents. Like, if you knew that this was reality, why would you have kids who now have to deal with this arbitrary issue of accepting Jesus, which in order to do that, you have to believe 100% in the whole thing, whatever, or burn forever. Like, why would you have a child if that's the reality that you know? So, yeah, it was a whole thing. And one day when I was 10 years old, I was sitting in my room thinking about it, as I did every day, and I thought to myself, just wait until you're 20. You're gonna know the answer when you're 20. And it gave me a little bit of relief, and I held on to that over the next few years, just remembering, like, just wait till you're 20, you're gonna know then. And so when I was 12, things changed. I one day went to my parents crying and told them that I wanted to go to school. I don't even really remember why I did that, but it was probably because I read a lot of books and I just would always hear about these fun experiences, and so I probably wanted to have, a normal kid experience, instead of just doing nothing all day every day except contemplate my own death. But surprisingly, my parents decided that they were gonna send us to school, and we moved to a little island in the middle of the ocean. I mean, not the middle of the ocean, but some miles out, with a tiny school, and I went to school there. And everything in my life changed, because now I had a schedule. I had things to think about other than death, and I had friends who were not religious, and so we would talk about things other than death. And so I kind of stopped really having as many issues. Well, those kind of issues. I had a whole other set of issues that happen when you go to school for the first time ever at age 12 and you don't understand the politics. So, a lot of things can happen. And after a year we moved to Florida, where I went to a huge high school, and a lot happened there too. I went there for 2 years. So in total, I have gone to school for 3 years in my life, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. Okay? And when I was 15, I was at this school. I met this guy who was a senior, and we started dating. And when the summer came, school ended, he graduated, and my parents said that they were going to go back to Maine for the summer, and I didn't want to go because I was dating this guy. And I asked if I could stay with him for the summer, and my parents let me stay. So I didn't know, but that was permanent. So I stayed with him forever. And so I stayed there, and a year passed. I decided just not to go back to school and just graduate homeschool style, and just because he wasn't going to school, so I didn't, and plus that I thought it would be like a lot of work to enroll and go, and he, like, nobody really wanted me to go to school, so I also figured might as well not. And so yeah, that was it. I was an adult. And the next year I started working, and we got married. We got married for a couple of reasons. One reason was the guilt, because, I was still I considered myself Christian, and you're not supposed to sleep with somebody before you're married. And I never stopped craving that connection. I always wanted a spiritual connection. And so when I was growing up, there was never a reason that I couldn't have one other than doubt. But now there was a reason. The reason that God wasn't showing up for me was because I was I was sleeping with somebody when I wasn't married. And so I decided to get married so that maybe God would stop ignoring me. And for the record, I never felt God. My entire childhood, I tried. I would lay there just wanting anything, any sign, any feeling, and it was nothing. Obviously at church, when they play emotional music, I would get emotional, but I never felt like something that I would distinguish as God or a spirit or anything like that. So I got married, and there were, again, just more sad years of my life where I was very insecure. And one day, the guy that I was married to came to me when I was 16, and he said, "Hey, watch this video. It helped me a lot." And it was this guy on YouTube telling the viewer how to be confident, and he was just giving simple tips. But for some reason, it blew my mind, and it planted this seed of maybe it is possible to change, because that had never occurred to me. I had just thought I am like this, and I had been jealous of the guy that I was dating because he was so friendly and charismatic and everybody liked him. And I thought, like, people don't like me. I'm just kind of more of a dark, negative energy in every room. And no matter what I do, I just feel like people don't like me as much. And I'm not charismatic. And so he would always tell me, like, I used to be really awkward and shy, but I worked on it and I changed. And I didn't believe him. I thought, like, sure, that's just your personality. But watching that video really made me think, okay, maybe it's possible that this is a real thing. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe change is possible? ? And that was a pivotal point for me. But I still didn't change for years. I continued in my ways, and luckily I wasn't really having as many existential crisis moments because, again, I had stuff to distract me. But they would come up sometimes, and I would talk to my then husband about it, and he would always laugh and tell me, like, that's crazy because that's not my view of religion at all. He had a more positive relationship with Christianity because when he went to church as a kid, it was to Sunday school. He didn't actually know what was in that book. So he wasn't traumatized from it at all. And he thought of God as a nice guy. Whereas, again, I had read the book. You can't read the book and think of God as a nice guy. Okay? So, unless you are wildly delusional, there just is a lot of stuff in there that I find to be morally reprehensible on the deepest level. Like, it's not even illogical, although it is logical, but I would just feel it in my body. And I don't really want to get into specifics, but basically, God in the Bible is very unfair. He randomly will kill people for the smallest of offenses, and then other people, like Solomon, King Solomon, who had hundreds of wives and concubines, which, just think about that. Think about those women and their lives and what their lives must have been like. And that was God's best friend. And obviously the Bible does not celebrate that, but it definitely does just excuse it, like, oh yeah, Solomon did some things bad, but God loved him, and it's like, in other parts of the Bible it says that God cares about the sparrow, even the sparrow, and it's like, okay, God loves the sparrow, but apparently he doesn't care about women because those women were just expected to be glorified as slaves for their whole life. Probably the king saw them once, took their V, and then never talked to them again. You know what I mean? That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. Okay? So, anyways, I still considered myself to be Christian because if not that, then what? I still wanted to be good. I wanted to connect with something bigger than myself, and I had that desire. But the more I learned about Christianity, And the more I remembered and the more I had context to really understand what I had learned as a child, it just, as a woman, like, you really viscerally feel how evil and corrupt it is. But I wasn't allowing myself to really think that yet. And so there was a rock bottom moment. So in 2021, my husband and I had just recently bought a home, our first home. Things were going well. I had started doing personal development the year before. Actually, I think like 3 years before. And I still had a long way to go, but I was becoming a lot more confident and positive and working on my insecurities. My husband also started like really taking personal development serious again, and he was reading books about integrity and how to be, a good man for your family and whatever. And I guess he came up to a point in his journey where he had to face something that he had done. That happens for all of us, but he came to me and told me that he had cheated on me 4 years prior. And, we had a very close relationship physically, like in proximity, I mean. Like, we were always together. So the fact that he could, like, the one day out of 6 years that we weren't together, he would cheat on me and then lie to my face about it for 4 years after. For me, that is not something that I can just overlook. And so this was rock bottom, number 1. And yeah, what happened next was just a really awful time of depression, impulsive, risky behavior, and, we had to sell our house. It was just a really chaotic time. I lost everything. And after this, I moved out because we sold the house, and I got my first apartment on my own. I was 21 years old. I was really happy to be on my own in a weird way. I was feeling simultaneously the worst I had ever felt, and there was this weird excitement. And I started, it's funny because I was doing a lot of bad behaviors, like drinking a lot, hanging out with guys from dating apps in an unsafe manner, meaning like I would have somebody that I didn't know come over, or I would go to their house. That's not safe, okay? But I was at rock bottom and I didn't really care about my safety. So I was doing a lot of those bad behaviors, and I was also doing some good behaviors. Like, I was going to the gym. I finally had my own space to organize and clean. I was listening to a lot of podcasts and reading books, and I was like working on different ideas for businesses, and I was putting myself out there online. I had started posting on TikTok, just random little videos, which I would have never done before, but when you hit rock bottom, you have nothing to lose. So who cares if somebody sees your TikTok and thinks it's cringe? Like, who cares? That's what rock bottom gives you. It gives you this fuck it attitude, which, again, sometimes can lead to bad behaviors, but it can also lead to behaviors that benefit you. So, I watched this video by this guy that I started watching because he's an INFJ. I'm an INFJ also. And his name's Clayton Arnold. He has a YouTube channel. But he made this video called Why I Left Christianity. And I watched it, and it really hit home for me. And it kind of gave me the courage to mentally unclick that box and finally switch and not think of myself as a Christian. And it's funny because now that seems like so not a big deal, but when you're raised in that context, not being a Christian that's dead. Like, that's crazy. You feel like you're gonna get struck down by God. You feel like, you always have this paranoid thought in the back of your mind, like, is this the devil getting me away from religion? And you think, like, am I, what's the word, a heretic? Or, there's a lot of mental chains that hold you into this box. And so I was ready, finally. I unclicked the box. And there was nothing. I had no other answer. I guess that's what they call, like, agnostic or whatever, where you just don't know. And you admit to not knowing, which I respect, because, again, I was raised by people who I think, on a certain level, do not know, but they felt like they had to pretend that they knew, or they convinced themselves that they knew, but they didn't, but whatever. So I just sat in the emptiness, which, again, at the time felt terrifying, but also very freeing, because what that means is that I sat and I thought, what happens if I were to die today? And the answer is, I don't know. And the truth of that resonated throughout me, and it just felt like so much peace. Weirdly, because you'd think that having an answer of, like, heaven or hell would make you feel good, I guess, but it didn't, because it wasn't true. So that felt bad for me. But just accepting the fact that I don't know, it felt like so true. And yeah, it's scary. It's scary not to know, but it kind of frees you from these people that try to manipulate you and tell you that you have to follow this path or else you're gonna be tortured for eternity. Following that sort of thing makes you very susceptible to manipulation. You're a pawn to be pushed around by the powers that be, and you give your power away to them. So, I don't mean for this to be a super anti-Christian video, but that was a big part of my journey, was, deconstructing from organized religion. So at this point, again, I'm living a life where I wake up in the morning, go to the gym, I listen to podcasts or YouTube videos while I clean, I try to work on building a business. Then at nighttime, I drink a whole bunch, go on Tinder, match with random guys, and I was also doing live stream at the time, so I would drink a bunch because I would have to be very bubbly on live, and that's not really my personality. I'm more chill or intense when I talk about things that I care about, but I worked on this app that basically you have to act like bubbly and flirty, and then the viewers send you gifts, and that's how I was paying my bills. But it was not my real personality to act like that, and so I would have to drink first. So it was very, again, like, it was not sustainable. So one morning, I woke up early to go to the gym, and as I was doing my makeup, I listened to a podcast, and there was this guy named Eckhart Tolle who was on it, and he was talking about the fact that we are the awareness. And I think he said, like, close your eyes, and what do you see? It's just all black. And basically he was explaining that, like, you are not your body, you are not your name, you're not the way that you look or your personality. You are that thing, that awareness that's watching. And like when you close your eyes, that thing that's just silently observing, that is who you really are. And that was something that I had already known intuitively my whole life. That was part of the reason that I had existential crises, because I was fully aware that that awareness was me, and that awareness would have to experience death and all of these things, and that's what scared me, having to watch. And so when I was listening to that, I knew it, but I could feel it on a new level. Like, I viscerally understood what that meant. And so it was a sort of awakening. And for me, the way that I experience awakenings, it's like something just hits you. Like, you almost reel back a little bit, and your head just is like, wait, like, you just feel this, like, expansion, and it almost throws you off balance for a few days or for the day, while you kind of look around at reality in a new way. And so I was just really thinking about, like, what does that mean, and understanding what it means. And I guess people call that like an ego death or whatever, which is where you separate yourself, the awareness, from the avatar. The avatar being the ego, being your name, personality, what you look like, your experiences. All of that is just a character, an avatar that you are embodying in this lifetime. And it's also scary because again, it's stepping into the unknown. It's like, if that's not who I am, who am I? The awareness. Well, who's the awareness? And it keeps going, and you kind of just have to sit in that unknown. And it's a very expansive unknown. A lot of times I feel that questions are more expansive than answers. The question opens it up. The answer shuts it. So it's like, I like to have those unanswered and unanswerable questions. I had to get all cozy here. But yeah, so another mini awakening I experienced was that same week. I was listening to another podcast or something, and the idea was the only thing that truly exists is the now, right now. And again, it's one of those things that, you can be like, yeah, I know. But when you viscerally understand it and realize what that means, an awakening occurs. And so it was just realizing that the past and the future are never experienced unless through the now moment. So the only thing that ever exists is right now. And I don't know, I think that really helps bring you back to awareness, because a lot of times I think it's easy to live in the past or the future, remembering things or fantasizing about what could be. And again, I forget who said this, but somebody explained it in a really good way, which is, imagine if you were on a stage in an auditorium and the lights in the whole auditorium were on. You would be able to see all the way back to the back door. And you could see all the chairs and up in the balcony and everything. And that's kind of what it's like when you are looking at the past or the future. You can look at it all and that's fine. But when the spotlight is on you, when all of your attention is on the present moment, you can't really see all of that anymore. It's like blurred out, it's dark, and all you can focus on is right here. And it brings all of the energy to the stage. Everyone's looking at the stage. That's what's happening right now. And so that's what you want to do. You want to bring your awareness to the only thing that will ever exist, which is the now. And yeah, basically life is a collection of now moments. And when you start living your life in a way that acknowledges that, it's very different. It's very, very different. And so again, I was reeling from this understanding that I could feel flooding through my body. And every time I would have these little awakenings, I would feel some grief with it, because it was like I was mourning what I thought was true and letting go of the story, and it kind of felt painful sometimes, but again, good. Ultimately, it felt good. And so I had these awakenings. Also, I didn't really know what manifesting was. I kind of knew, but it seemed very gimmicky. I watched one video about it on YouTube, and there was this girl saying to like write affirmations of what you want and stuff like that. And I just didn't really resonate with it. But it was kind of entering my awareness of like, okay, manifesting, that's a thing, got it. And I did make a vision board because, you know, that just seems like a good thing to do anyways. Print out pictures that represent your goal life, your vision for the future that you want, and, you know, just have it up in front of you as inspiration throughout the day so you can make choices that lead towards that future. So things were going well. I really loved where I lived. I liked my routine, other than the drinking and the risky behavior. I did quit the live streaming because I just couldn't do it anymore. It just wasn't it wasn't me, and I was being drained by it. I didn't like drinking that often. I didn't like having to act in a way that was not true to me. I didn't like having to ask people to send gifts. I didn't like it, and so I quit. And that was how I was paying the bills again. So I was just living off of whatever money I had left. But again, I just stepped into the unknown. I didn't have an answer, but I knew that what I was doing wasn't working for me anymore, even though it was paying really well. And so I stepped into the unknown. And then came another rock bottom. So I don't think that I want to go into too much detail with this. But I had met someone from a dating app, and there was a violent incident, okay, at my apartment. And I had an experience that was very traumatic, but also it allowed me to again experience this new perspective of life. I entered into this other, I don't know how to explain it, like, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Basically, it was what I would consider a near-death experience. Obviously I didn't die, so okay, but I psychologically thought that I was going to. And so I entered into this space where time was moving really slow, and it just felt like this very strong deja vu. Like, it was very familiar, like I had lived it 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times. And it was like if you ever played a video game, and like a shooting game, and you die, your character kind of like the screen starts getting red around the edges of the screen, and it turns kind of black and white and slow, and your character kind of starts falling, like the screen starts going sideways. That's what it felt like, and that's what it, like, the experience was like. And so it really felt like, oh, this is the answer. My whole life I've been asking, what will it be like to die? And, now I was, that awareness, it's kind of making me emotional to think about it, but it was like, it was almost calming, and it was like soothing and soft, but also very cold. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I kind of felt detached, but very aware. Detached from what was actually happening physically, but very aware of what was happening. I don't know. So, yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Time stretched out, things slowed down. It was like I was in this little chamber within a bubble, locked away while the experience was happening outside of me. And so I didn't know. I thought that this was the end. And what would happen after that, I don't know, but it was like falling asleep, like you just slowly watch it go and then that's it, But after that, I had to leave my apartment because it was no longer safe for me there. And so it was very, again, rock bottom. I felt very sad to walk away suddenly like that. And I went to Maine because that's where my parents were. And I had no money, so I asked if I could just go stay at their house there. And I did. And in Maine, I worked on personal development again. I was learning how to program at the time, and I was also trying to work on like some business ideas, and I was working out and trying to, focus on nutrition and stuff like that. And while I was there, I had a lot of grief, a lot of PTSD, and I was drinking a lot, to be honest. And I just felt really sad, but also really good sometimes, and very free, because that's what rock bottom has to offer. A lot of freedom, because you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And so yeah, I was just working on my social media stuff too, like posting a lot on Instagram and stuff like that. Also, I did learn a little bit more about manifesting, and it was starting to resonate more, but still, I didn't fully understand. And again, there was a lot of gimmicky stuff too that just didn't really resonate with me. So I decided to go back to Florida. And by the way, I just noticed in my notes something I had written about how the now is the only thing that exists. And I forgot to say this before, so I'll just say it real quick. this brought up grief because it meant constant release forever. Nothing stays. That was painful for me because all I ever wanted was consistency and stability. The present moment, while always here, kept being pried from my fingers. The more I tried to hold on, the less I could truly experience. And yeah, it's just about how if you think about the past and the future not existing, it does make you feel like you're just floating in the now. And every time you look, it's like the now that you were just in is gone. And so you keep trying to look and make sure it's right there and it's gone. I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but it can cause a lot of fear when you are thinking about surrendering into the ever-present now, which literally just means this constant flow, constant surrender as time flows through you in a way. So I returned to Florida. I had barely any money, and I wasn't really making any money, like a tiny bit online, but not much. And I just, again, stepped into the unknown. I felt like I wanted to go back, and I was ready, and so I did. As soon as I went back to Florida, I experienced another traumatic event. And this traumatic event was more intense. However, I was less afraid because of the fact that I had already experienced a similar traumatic event, and so I was returning to a familiar space in my mind. However, the PTSD was a lot more intense that time. I could not sleep, and I was drinking a lot again. There was just a lot of fear, intense fear, and it was very visceral and unavoidable, all-consuming. During this time, I learned about Neville Goddard and the law of assumption, which goes under the umbrella of manifestation, but it's a different approach. And his work is a lot about identity shifting, which is basically you change the way that you see yourself to match the reality that you desire. So, for example, if you want a YouTube channel, you don't just want to sit down and write, I have a YouTube channel. Instead, you want to think about, okay, who has a YouTube channel? A YouTuber. What does a YouTuber do? Like when they wake up in the morning and their routine, and then you adopt the lifestyle and the vibe of the person who has the reality that you want to experience. And for me, this resonated a million times more than, just writing down affirmations or trying to visualize random scenes from your dream life. It was a lot more tangible for me to think about, what do I want? What kind of person has those things? What can I do now that will get me in the right direction of becoming this kind of person? And I was really excited, honestly. Also, I started trying some meditations. You know, I don't meditate very often, like with guided meditations, but when I do, it's very powerful. And I did this one sleep meditation, like you do it right before you sleep, for abundance, because I needed money to pay for the next month, and I had no money. I went to sleep after doing that meditation. I woke up in the morning and I had an email offering me a brand deal for Instagram for $2,000, which was almost enough for the whole month. And so that was cool. That was really cool. But yeah, again, months passed. I was really, again, doing a lot better in some ways, but still really bad in other ways. And so I still had a really hard time sleeping. I would stay up till like 4 a.m. just because I couldn't relax enough to fall asleep. I was staying in Airbnbs, and I would, have a camera set up, and I would keep like watching the camera all night because I just kept imagining like bad things happening and people showing up and scary things, and so I'd just watch the camera to see if someone was gonna show up. And my mind would like overlay an imagination of a person that I was scared of showing up, even though that person was in jail. But yeah, that's PTSD. So this is when I found ASMR. I was on TikTok and I found this lady who was doing Reiki, and I didn't really know about Reiki or ASMR. I had heard about ASMR, but I didn't really think of it as something that I was interested in. But watching this lady's Reiki videos, it really felt like it was doing something. I felt so safe and loved, and I would be crying my eyes out, laying in bed, watching her TikToks back to back, and that helped me for months. And I had a lot of fear lessons that I had to go through, and ASMR and Reiki ASMR helped me get through those fear lessons. And it still helps me when I have to go through more fear lessons. But yeah, eventually I was out of money. My parents were back in Florida, so I moved back in with them. I learned to sit with fear because, again, I kept having these fear lessons and I kept trying to make the fear go away, and I realized that the only way out is through. And so when I was in the midst of the fear, I tried something different. I tried to sit with it and feel it, let it course through me and tell me what it wants to tell me. And it was hard. It was really hard. But by doing that, I started releasing fear. And I had, and still have, I had way more then, obviously, but I had a lot of fear to release. But slowly, I was starting to release it. I did another meditation where I imagined it was this thing where you had to let go of like 3 things that you wanted to let go of. And I did that meditation back then. This was like a year and a half ago. And all 3 of those things have come true, by the way. So, just saying, those guided meditations, like, you don't have to do them a lot, but if you do them like every couple months, specifically for something that you want to do, I don't know, it has crazy results. I started reading a lot. I read Psycho-Cybernetics, Power versus Force, and some other books, which again we're talking about identity shifting in Psycho-Cybernetics. And I watched this guy on YouTube called Quasi, who would talk a lot about identity shifting, and I got clearer about my goals. I started doing a gratitude journal because that's what helps bridge the gap between who you are right now and who you want to be. You're never gonna become this person until you start noticing the things that are happening right now that are nudging you closer. And so by doing my gratitude journal, I started focusing my attention on the tiny little things that were pulling me slowly in the direction of the reality I wanted to exist in. For example, let's say I will use a real example from back then. So, I wanted to be a person who had plenty of money. I had no money and was in a lot of debt because I had been living off my credit cards for a little while. So, how do you get from here to here? Well, you need to focus on what are the things in my life right now that represent abundance? What are the things that I do that make me feel like I have money? For me, some of those things were getting a coffee, going to the beach, reading books, lounging, because those are things that typically you would imagine somebody who has plenty of money would do that. It shows that you have freedom with your time to do those, luxury things like going to the beach or whatever. And also, if I would work with a brand or something, they might just give me like $100, which in the face of my $9,000 credit card debt seemed like nothing, but it's something. And so I would write that down in my journal and be grateful for it. And I started doing this as a habit, and things started changing quickly after I started my gratitude journal. I read Power versus Force, and I learned about the consciousness scale, and that really opened my mind too, and I started seeing things in a different way, and it allowed me to have even deeper empathy for people and understand that it's not that they're good or bad, it's just that they're at a different level of consciousness. And, from a certain point of view, it's not better or worse, it just is. And so, also that explains why some people are drawn to religion, because if you are at a lower consciousness level and religion is above, then for you to join, it actually brings your consciousness up. So it's good for you to be religious. But if you are at a higher consciousness level and you try to be religious, it pulls you down. So, not everybody is on the same point in their journey. And so for some people, religion really is a good thing. And, for me, that was an interesting thing to realize, because for me it had been such a hurtful thing, but I'm coming from a different place than some people are. So other things happened during this time. I changed my perspective on a lot of things surrounding like what other people think is right versus what I think is right. I moved to Texas because my family was moving to Texas, so I figured might as well go. And on the drive, I listened to the audiobook of Reality Transurfing. Now, this book really, again, expanded my mind. There's some stuff that I don't agree with in the book, but there's a lot that really resonated with me. It's a completely different way of viewing reality, where basically they talk about how every possible reality exists, and it exists in the form of an information field, and you tap into it with your focus and your awareness. You attune to whatever reality you are aligned with, and then your attention allows it to be manifested into this 3D reality. The guy who wrote the book is a quantum physicist, so it's coming from that perspective. And honestly, I think that's my favorite book ever. Like, it really expanded my mind. Like, listening to it, it felt like it was just beyond my comprehension, or right on the line. Like, I could understand it, but I was straining. My mind was being pushed to its maximum to really fathom what that would mean. It's a big book too, so there's a lot of stuff in there. But it made me think of reality as different than just like this one physical story. Instead, it made me think of this unlimited possibility, and you can choose the reality that you prefer, but there's also a lot of surrender that goes into that, because you can't control, you can only choose. But I recommend reading that book or listening to the audiobook on YouTube for free if you're curious in that view of reality. It was very helpful for me. But I wouldn't say that it's a beginner book. It's kind of a lot. But if you're ready for that, then it's worth it. I got to Texas and my mind was reeling. There was just so much. I was seeing reality so different. And I was more coming at it from a very, like, self-focused way. Like, I was more focused on creating the reality that I prefer. a lot of that is also because, I really hated how religion always told you to sacrifice and, live a humble life, be happy without getting your desires, and basically telling you not to listen to yourself. And so reality transurfing is kind of the opposite of that. It's telling you, listen to your desires. Let your desires lead you. Choose what you want. Don't give up your desires because other people try to manipulate you into laying down your life for their cause. Don't do that. Don't be a pawn. And so, I was kind of on that side of things. And then I had another sort of awakening in Texas, which was the visceral understanding that everything is one. I'm trying to remember where I learned that. There were a couple different things. I was listening to a lot of podcasts. I read a book. I don't remember exactly. I can't pinpoint, but basically, I guess I had already learned it, but I just learned it on a deeper level, a more visceral level, that everything, not just people, but literally everything we see is an illusion. It's all connected. It's all one thing split into this world where it looks like there's different things, but it's all made up of the same one substance that is consciousness. And I made a video on my other channel called Everything is Lexi, because my dog is named Lexi, and I started seeing the world as Lexi. So everything that I would see, I would look at it with love, the same way I would look at Lexi. And for me, this was a really beneficial and beautiful way to live. Even if, it was heightened during that time where I was first understanding it. There were other things too I was starting to open my mind to while I was in Texas, but I'm not going to get into that right now because it's a bit off topic. But there were a lot of things that were just expanding my mind and changing the way that I viewed everything in reality. Also during this time, a lot of sadness related to my childhood was coming back up because I was living with my family, so it was triggering some of those pain points. One night I was laying in bed and I didn't mean for this to happen, but I was just overcome with emotion and I was visualizing, not on purpose, like it just was, I was basically watching it in my mind, not on purpose. I was back in my old house that I lived in when I was a kid, walking into the house, up the stairs, down the hall, and into the room where my younger self was. And it was a very emotional experience, and I just realized that on some level, that was me who told my younger self, just wait until you're 20. Really, it was like 21 when the whole existential crisis thing ended, but yeah, it was weird because it was like, I know this sounds crazy, but it was like I was experiencing myself going back to tell my younger self, and all that ever exists is the present moment anyways, so that can have a lot of implications when it comes to time. But I don't know, that's just an experience that I had. Also, another thing happened before that I forgot to mention, which is one of the meditations that I did, I met my higher self. And in the guided meditations, basically they tell you like what to imagine. And so part of the meditation was you do all this stuff, you get relaxed, then you go to this door, you open it up, there's all this light coming in, and you see a figure coming in like the light, and they get closer and you realize it's your higher self. Like, hopefully you know what that means based on context, but yeah, just like a more evolved, more conscious self that knows your whole story. The past, future, present, all of it. They can see from that higher perspective, your higher self. But the person that came, I recognized her. Obviously, she looks similar to me, but different. But I recognized her because when I was 16, I was in a really bad fight with my ex that I was married to. And I felt so alone and so sad. And I was crying and I just felt like so abandoned and alone. And I closed my eyes and this vision flashed in my mind. Again, I did not imagine it, like I didn't try to see this. In fact, it was so random that it kind of shocked me and I stopped crying because I was confused. But this image flashed in my mind of this woman holding me, like I was like laying on her lap and she was holding me, like I was like right here. She was holding me, and it was all black, the background, and she was wearing a dress made of stars. And yeah, she was just holding me, and it brought me a lot of peace. But I didn't know what that was back then. I was still Christian back then. Now, years later, when I did that meditation and that figure was coming out of the light, when she got closer, I realized, hey, you're the lady with the dress of stars. And putting those two, like putting two and two together was mind-blowing also, because it was like, damn, you were always there. But I don't think, my higher self wanted to confuse me when I was a kid, because if they had shown themselves, I might have gotten confused and thought that it was God, and that would have been confusing for my story. But it was very cool. I had another experience like that too after I moved back, because again, I felt this feeling when I was in Texas that I wanted to come back to Florida. And so I did, again, stepping out into the unknown, not knowing how it would go. And I went. One of the things that happened was I had more fear lessons, and one day I was gonna not tell this because I was like, wait, is this too weird? But I don't know. So one day I was just overcome with fear, and I knew I needed to acknowledge it. And I was blow drying my hair because I had just gotten out of the shower, And I just felt led to do this. So I was looking in the mirror and acknowledging my fear. And I was just saying over and over as I was blow drying my hair, I was saying, I know, it's okay, we're safe now. I'm sorry, I love you. And basically, I was trying to speak to my inner child and that younger part of myself that was afraid, and was afraid because it was trying to protect me. And so I was acknowledging it and thanking it and seeing it. Yeah. And I visualized it as this kind of mass of black energy. Just like, imagine if you just scribbled on a page a lot. That's how I imagined it. And just in my imagination, I wasn't seeing things. I've never seen things well. But anyways, so I was just imagining this like mass of fear, and I kept saying out loud, and I was smiling but also like crying, like it was emotional. I was just saying, I love you, I'm sorry, it's okay now, we're safe, it's okay. And I was visualizing it getting smaller and smaller and smaller until finally it was like a little child, a tiny little child, but made of black scribbles. Like it was like the outline of a child figure. And I just imagined like taking her hand and hugging her and telling her, you're safe now. But it's funny because that same little thing I had painted that a year before, 2 years before. I was doing this thing that I called intuitive painting, which was intuitive painting. I would play this music, this Thai music, and I would dance around in my apartment, that same apartment I was telling you about earlier. And I would just paint whatever wanted to be painted without thinking. And one day I painted this painting that had these 4 quadrants with different colors, and at the center it was this little like black outline, like, what's it called, silhouette, but all of scribbles that kind of had all these tendrils going out all over the whole painting. And it was the silhouette of a little girl, just made of black scribbles. And as I was painting that, again, I did not plan to paint that, it just naturally came out. And as I was painting it, I started feeling this dark presence behind me, and I started like looking over my shoulder, like, I don't know, it just felt creepy in the room for some reason. It kind of felt like I had been watching true crime, and you start getting paranoid. It was that sort of feeling. But now, years later, when I was visualizing, and then it got really small and I recognized it, like, hey, you're the girl from the painting. And then I realized, oh, maybe that's why it felt creepy, because it was fear. I was painting fear, and in a way kind of painting how the fear was affecting all of these aspects of my life. I still have that painting in my storage unit somewhere, so maybe I will go find it someday. But yeah, it was really cool. I also stopped drinking, and that was one of the 3 things that I had meditated about wanting to give up. But I don't know, just one day it was time, and I stopped drinking. And it's funny because a week after I stopped drinking, I made this channel. And that was like 10 months ago, more than 10 months ago. I might do a video about drinking and why I stopped and all that once I hit 1 year sober, because I don't know, I feel like that's an iconic time to make it. But that really helped me a lot, because when I was drinking it would cause a lot of other risky behavior, and once I stopped drinking, all those other behaviors fell away quickly. So yeah, a lot has happened, okay, and a lot of other things have happened since then also. I experience new growth, new understandings all of the time, and I come back around to balance. So sometimes I go far in one direction and then I come back around later. But I'm not going to share any of the really recent things, just because I think it's better to wait, keep some things just private, and then I'll share them when I feel ready. But just know that it is an ever evolving process. So I know that this was a little bit all over the place. It's a lot, and it's not really like a, steps 1, 2, and 3 process. It's more of a upward spiral that just, there's a lot that happens, and there's a lot that I might have even forgotten to include. But basically, for me, my spiritual awakening is all about becoming more aware, looking at the truth, asking questions, feeling how it feels in my body, not being afraid to see reality in a different way than other people want me to see it, and not being afraid to sit in the unknown and let my body tell me the truth, because my body knows the truth viscerally, but a lot of pain happens when you try to suppress that knowing. Like when I was a child and I was trying and trying and trying to believe something that I viscerally disagreed with. It's not even that I disagreed, I just knew it was wrong. So I don't know. Hopefully, if you are a Christian, you are not offended. I know I came off a little strong against it, but that's because of my personal experiences. I know there are a lot of Christians who don't, experience it in that kind of dark way, which is fantastic, great. And there's a lot of spiritual people that like Jesus. I like Jesus. I don't have a problem with Jesus. I just have a problem with a lot of the other stuff. But anyways, I hope that you found this interesting. I know it's a really long video, and there's so much more to talk about and to dive into, but I hope this kind of gave you a good history of my evolution. And by the way, like throughout this journey, every time I would experience these new awakenings, it would echo out into my life. The way that I looked changed, the people I was around changed, the lifestyle I had changed, my surroundings changed, like where I lived, my abundance, all of that. And so a lot of this journey is just about change and expansion, truth, love, and death. Because in order to, expand, you have to let go. Because if you're holding on, it's hard to keep moving, flowing. But anyways, I have no idea if I explained this good or not. So I hope I did. And I love you. Hopefully I will see you soon. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Bye.